Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Indriana Putri Mareningrum, and I'd like to explain material about non-literal language processing. Okay, the definition is non-literal language refers to any use of language that deviates from its literal meaning, such as metaphor, irony, sarcasm, hyperbole, and idioms. Processing non-literal language involves a complex cognitive process that goes beyond simple interpreting the literal meaning of the word being used. Non-literal language processing is an essential component of everyday communication and plays an important role in social interaction, humor, and persuasion. It is also an important area of study in fields such as linguistics, psychology, and neuroscience. Okay, let's discuss more about first is types of non-literal language, and then the standard pragmatic view. Next is metaphor, and then embodiment and the interpretation of non-literal language, and the neural basis of non-literal. Types of non-literal language. Non-literal language takes many forms, such as idioms, metaphor, irony, and sarcasm. The literal meaning of the word used is different from the intended speaker meaning, requiring listener to make pragmatic inference based on context, speaker, and literal context to understand the message. The recognition problem involves identifying when non-literal language is being used, while the second problem requires the listener to compute the non-literal meaning. Next is the standard pragmatic view. The standard pragmatic view of language interpretation assumes that computing the literal meaning of an expression is the core function. This means that when people hear a metaphor, they initially interpret it literally before attempting to integrate it with the linguistic and social context. The listener then engages in further pragmatic inference and non-literal interpretation only if the literal meaning is deficient in some way. To determine if the literal interpretation is deficient, the listener may check whether it is true or false. If the literal interpretation is false, the listener may adopt a metaphoric interpretation that resolves the conflict between the truth condition imposed by the word and the information content of the utterance. The metaphoric interpretation allows the listener to discover a true interpretation and the reason why the speaker used the metaphor. Next is metaphor. A metaphor allows us to indicate a relationship between two elements. The first element is the topic and the second element is the vehicle. The topic is the focus of a conversation. It is what the discourse is about. This is explained from Ortoni, 1975. While the conversation to simile view of metaphor interpretation is simple, it may not account for all the difference between similes and metaphor. One key difference is that literal comprehension are generally receivable, whereas metaphoric comprehension are not, or the meaning changes when reserved. Next is embodiment and the interpretation of non-literal language. According to Gibbs, embodiment and mental simulation are important factors in metaphor interpretation. This is because metaphor often draw on our experience with physical bodies and process. For instance, the metaphor emotion is liquid in a container of evokes physical process and liquids. It found the people's understanding of emotion and their understanding of the psyches of hate, fluence, and container were similar. Additionally, when people read idiomatic expression, such as John played his tag, they respond faster to subsequent target words such as hat that express physically characteristic of the search domain. And next is the neural basis of non-literal language. Neuropsychological and neuroimaging studies have shown that different networks of brain areas respond differently to literal non-literal language. And patients with brain damage may have selective deficit in understanding or producing either type of language. Early research on brain damage obtains suggestion that the right hemisphere of the brain may play a special role in the interpretation of non-literal speech, as patients with right hemisphere damage were less able than patients with left hemisphere damage in matching verbal metaphor. Okay, and the conclusion is this is challenge the standard pragmatic view of non-literal language processing and suggests that non-literal meaning are directly accessible for many non-literal expression. Various theories have been proposed to explain how metaphor and idiom are understood, including the class inclusion hypothesis and Gibbs theory. That component of idiom retains some of their standard meaning. Different neural networks are involved in the comprehension and production of literal and non-literal language. And research on the neural basis of language is still in its early stage. However, there are well-articulated theories to work from and tools available for further. Okay, thank you. Maybe that's all from me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.